Now, in every single NFL season since 2020, there's been at least 4 new playoff teams and at least 2 division winners in each season. And many times, these new playoff teams / division winners were terrible the year before, but they came out of nowhere and shocked the entire world. And in 2026, I believe that's going to happen in the NFC South. Because as you guys can tell from the title, I believe the New Orleans Saints will win that division and they will be one of the new playoff teams / division winners in 2026. They finished with a lowly 6-11 record in 2025, but they looked better than expected and they ended the year 5-1 in their last 6 games. And I love their offseason. So in today's video, I'm going to explain why it will be enough to win the NFC South and make the playoffs for the first time since 2020. Now before we do get started, make sure you guys do hit the like button since it really does help out the channel. And make sure you guys do subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any new videos. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get things started. Now, I want to start things off by talking about the Saints offense, and as you would expect from a bad team, they were not very good on that side of the ball in 2025, as they were below average in most team offensive stats. However, they looked a lot better in their last 7 games, as they were 16th in dropback EPA and dropback success rate, and averaged 20 points per game in that stretch, and overall, they looked much better. And mind you, that was with pretty minimal talent, a poor rushing attack, and a bad offensive line. And despite all of that, I expect the Saints offense to be much better in 2026, especially with their offseason additions. For one, they have a true running back 1 now in Travis Etienne, who they signed in free agency, and fun fact, he's from Louisiana, but Travis Etienne, he's one of the best running backs in the league, and in 2025, he put up 1,107 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, averaged 4.3 yards an attempt, had 292 receiving yards, 6 receiving touchdowns, and according to PFF, he was 13th in forced missed tackles with 46 of them, and 12th in explosive runs with 26. And Travis alone, he should greatly improve this piss-poor rushing attack, and behind him, you have guys like Alvin Kamara and Devin Neal, and look, I know Alvin Kamara is washed, but I do think he is a capable running back too. The same can be said about Devin Neal, and who I think can be a really good backup or rotational running back. And along with that, the Saints' offensive line should be much improved this offseason. They already had a nice young tackle duo of Taliesin Fuaga and Calvin Banks, and both of those guys, they're already solid players, and in my opinion, they could develop into being very good ones. But then you'll also have Eric McCoy, who is a very good center, and they signed David Edwards in free agency to help bolster their interior offensive line. And David Edwards, he was a really good player for the Buffalo Bills. Now, Cesar Ruiz, he is a weak link, however, but I do expect this rushing attack to be much improved, this upcoming season because they signed guys like Travis Etienne, and their offensive line, in my opinion, should be a lot better. Along with that, New Orleans also upgraded their pass catchers. They already had Chris Olave, who's one of the best receivers in the league, and Juwan Johnson, who is a good starting tight end, and in the draft, they acquired both Jordan Tyson and Oscar Delp, and I'll admit, I didn't follow the draft too closely this year, but I did pay attention to a lot of the top guys like Jordan Tyson, and he was at minimum a top 3 receiver in this class, and there's a lot to like about Jordan Tyson, as he's very fast, quick, he's a good route runner, and he does have good hands, and in my opinion, he has the potential to be one of the best receivers in the NFL, but the biggest concern with him is obviously his durability and injury history, because he had a pretty bad injury history throughout his time in college, but if he can stay mostly healthy, I have no doubt in my mind that Jordan Tyson is going to be a very good receiver. And as for Oscar Delp, he was also one of the best tight ends in the draft, but I'm not sure how much playing time he will get in 2026, but he does have potential. And to cap it all off for the players, we have to talk about none other than the man himself, Tyler Shough. Now, Tyler Shough was a polarizing prospect coming out of Louisville because he possessed great physical tools and had some very nice flashes, but at the same time, he was kind of raw and he was an extremely old prospect. Not to mention, he had this viral moment. Now, Tyler didn't start until week 8, but he ended up having a really good rookie season. As in 9 games, he posted 2,384 passing yards, 10 passing touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 186 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. And Spencer Rattler, I don't think he was bad for the Saints, but it was clear that Tyler Shough, he was an upgrade and he was a lot better as he was super poised and he made New Orleans' offense far more efficient and just far better. The Saints' offense in their first 8 games averaged just 16 points per game, 295 yards per game, and had only 2 games where they scored 20 plus points. And they also averaged about 217 passing yards per game. But in their final 8 matches, they averaged 20 points per game, 330 yards per game, about 265 passing yards per game, and had 5 matches scoring over 20 plus points, including one where they scored over 30. And as a result, New Orleans went 5-4 in their last 9 games, and they looked like a much better team in the second half of 2025. And I was even surprised at how good Tyler Shough was, and you have to give him a lot of credit for how he played, especially when you consider the lack of talent around him. And funny enough, I think his age actually helped him out in a way because he had much more games under his belt, heading into the NFL, and that made his transition much easier. And as a result, he looked way more poised and comfortable compared to compared to what you would expect from a rookie quarterback. And I think Tyler has the potential to be a perennial top 8 to 13 quarterback, especially given his physical tools. I mean, he's a really big guy and he has a really good arm, plus he can run as well. Now, age might screw up his longevity, but he could absolutely be the Saints franchise quarterback in spite of how old he is. Now that he has even more experience and a much better team, I expect Tyler Shough to build upon his rookie year and be even better in 2026. And finally, we need to give a lot of credit to Kellen Moore because he had a really good first season as New Orleans head coach. While he only won 6 games, he made them a competitive team in spite of the lack of talent. And something I really liked is that in spite of how bad the Saints were in 2025, the New Orleans offense wasn't that bad for a team that only won 6 games. Now, was it really good? Obviously not. But again, it wasn't that, it wasn't like, unwatchably bad. And Kellen Moore, he's an offensive-minded head coach. And the reason why I bring this up is because when you hire a coach that specializes on one side of the ball, you expect that unit to at least be serviceable, even when there is a little bit of a talent disadvantage. And we saw that from him in 2025, and I'm very excited to see how the Saints offense looks in 2026, and I have very high hopes for it and think there's potential for them to be a top 10, offense in the league next year. Now that brings us to the Saints defense in 2025, and surprisingly, it was not that bad of a unit. They ranked 16th in team defense, 4th in passing defense, 19th in run defense, 16th in points per game, 9th in yards allowed per game, 3rd in third down defense, 10th in red zone defense, and 12th in points per drive. And not to mention, they were actually top 10 in many efficiency stats like EPA per play, success rate, and more. And that really surprised me. When I came across those numbers while doing research for this video, I had to blink twice to make sure my eyes were not deceiving me, which they weren't. And right off the bat, we gotta give Brandon Staley a shout out because ever since his failed head coaching tenure with the Chargers, he's been a laughingstock among NFL fans, and the Saints were really clowned on when they hired him as defensive coordinator, but truthfully, he did a really good job, especially considering the fact that, like Kellen Moore, he didn't have an uber-talented unit to work with. And the Saints defense in 2025, they did a good job of not allowing a lot of yards, but they weren't exactly the best when it came to allowing, not allowing points, but granted, it's not entirely their fault. But honestly, Brandon Staley, he was really good as the Saints defensive coordinator in 2025. And, once again, he really does deserve his flowers. And while I know he's not a good head coach and he wasn't for the Chargers, his track record has shown that he's a very good defensive coordinator. Like, if y'all remember in 2020 when he was the Rams DC, they were the best defense in the league that year. And he was a massive reason for that unit being so good. And it's a big reason why he was hired by the Chargers as their head coach in the first place. And, after his failed head coaching tenure, a lot of people, they really chalked up, the success he had with the Rams to the personnel he had. But I feel like this past season really showed that he isn't a guy who is carried by his personnel. Now, New Orleans did lose Demario Davis and Alontae Taylor, who was a solid corner, but I definitely think this unit could be above average in 2026, if not better. For one, their front seven isn't that bad, as on their defensive line, they have the likes of Chase Young, Carl Granderson. They brought back Cam Jordan, who, he is super old and way past his prime, but he had a pretty good year in 2025 and could still be a solid player. And they also drafted Christian Miller from Georgia in the second round in this past year's draft. And once again, I didn't follow this year's class as closely, but based on what I've read, he is a good nose tackle who can stop the run, but he does have work to do when it comes to being, rushing the passer and finishing plays. And again, I'm not sure how much playing time he's going to get in 2026, but maybe Christian Miller can help improve this team's run defense and he develops nicely. And in spite of losing Demario Davis, at linebacker, they have Pete Werner, who's, he's okay, nothing special. And they reunited with Caden Ellis in free agency, who started his career with the Saints before spending a few years with their arch nemesis in the Atlanta Falcons. But Caden Ellis, he's a pretty good linebacker, especially when it comes to blitzing and getting after the quarterback. And I'll admit, this front seven, it's not elite or anything like that. But with that said, they do have some talent. However, I'm very excited about the Saints secondary. At cornerback, they have a lot of young talent with guys like Kool-Aid McKinstry, Quincy Riley, and Jonas Sanker at nickelback. And Kool-Aid McKinstry, his second year was up and down because while he did have 3 interceptions and 17 pass deflections and a PFF grade of 69.5, he also allowed 752 yards and 8 touchdowns, and he had a passer rating of 100.5 when targeted, according to Pro Football Reference. But I do believe in Kool-Aid. He's already a solid player, and I was a big fan of him coming out of Alabama, and if he can cut down on the yards and touchdowns that he allowed, I think he's going to be a really good player. And both Quincy Riley and Jonas Sanker had pretty solid rookie years, and maybe they only get better from here. And to go along with it, the Saints did sign Martin Emerson, and although he is coming off a very big down season, he's had good years in the past, and maybe he can get back to his old self. And at safety, they do have Justin Reed and Julian Blackmon, and Justin Reed, he's a good starter, and although he missed virtually all of 2025 with an injury, Julian Blackmon has shown the ability to be a good starter as well. But, this Saints secondary, it does hinge a lot on the development of their young corners, but if all 3 of Kool-Aid, Quincy Riley, and Jonas Sanker take leaps, then I think this can definitely be an above-average secondary. And I don't really expect the Saints defense to be elite or anything like that in 2026, but I definitely think they could be a good unit, especially if, once again, their young players end up taking leaps, and they do have some talent for what it's worth. And again, Brandon Staley, he is a really good defensive coordinator, so maybe he can elevate this unit even more. Now, as I said in the intro, the Saints only won 6 games last year, despite a 1-7 start to the season, and a roster that once again was very lacking in talent. So when you consider those 2 factors, I think 6 wins is actually kind of impressive. And with the additions that they made this offseason and the leap that I expect Tyler Shough to take, I think New Orleans should be way better in 2026. And it also helps that they play in by far the NFL's most open and weakest division, that being the NFC South. And the NFC South, it's up for grabs to say the least. And I could see any team in that division among the, whether it's the Saints, Buccaneers, Panthers, or Falcons, taking home the crown in 2026. And when you take a look at New Orleans' schedule, outside of their division, they play the NFC North, the AFC North, the Raiders, the Giants, and the Cardinals. And I'll admit, if I'm wrong about the Saints and they hit their floor, I could see them being a pretty bad team and only winning like 5 or 6 games. But at the same time, I think they have a decently high ceiling of like 11 wins. Now, if I had to make a prediction right now, I think the Saints are going to win like 9 or 10 games. But I do think that should be enough to take home the NFC South crown, which I think they will end up doing. Now, it won't be a walk in the park because, like I said before, this division is up for grabs, and I think the gap between the Saints, Buccaneers, Panthers, and Falcons, no matter how you rank them, I don't think it's gargantuan, between any of those 4 teams. And while I think you could make a case for all 4 squads to win the NFC South, and again, I think the Saints are going to win the NFC South, but I think at least 1 to 2 and maybe all 3 of those teams will compete with them for the division crown. But ultimately, I do think New Orleans' offense is going to be top 10 next year. I think Tyler Shough is going to be a borderline top 10 quarterback, like top 10 to 14, top 10 to 15, something like that. And I also think they're going to have a solid defense on top of that, which again, that should be enough for like 9 or 10 wins and a division crown. Not to mention, I do have my gripes with the other NFC South teams. That's not to say the Saints are perfect, but again, the other NFC South teams, they do have some gripes that I think will help the Saints win the division. For one, the Buccaneers, although they do have a pretty good roster and they do have the best quarterback in the division as of right now in Baker Mayfield, who is, he is pretty good. I don't like Todd Bowles as their head coach at all, and I do think he is going to hold them back in spite of the talent that they do have. The Panthers, they're a solid team, and they are the reigning division champions. But at the end of the day, Bryce Young, he is still a big wild card and question mark, and he's extremely inconsistent. You never know what you're going to get out of him week in and week out. And because of that, the Panthers, they still are a little bit questionable. And the Falcons, they're not a bad team. And I do like the hiring of Kevin Stefanski as their head coach, but their quarterback situation, it's pretty questionable to say the least because, right now their options are Tua and Michael Penix, and I'm not a big fan or believer in either of them. But look, there's always turnaround in the NFL, like I said in the intro, and I think the Saints are going to be a part of it in 2026. And whatever it is, don't count out the New Orleans Saints heading into this year, because I think there is a high chance that they do win their division and/or make the playoffs. But that's all I got to say for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. It really does mean a lot to me. Again, make sure you do hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And check me out. I recently started a TikTok page where I yap about sports and other random stuff. So go ahead and drop a follow there if you have TikTok. It would really mean a lot. I'm trying to grow that page. But without further ado, I'm out, you guys.